Hey everybody, welcome back to Build a Website from Scratch with HTML and CSS. This video is called IDs and Classes. In this lecture we're going to learn a little bit about HTML IDs and HTML classes, what the difference between them is, and when you would use them. So create a new folder on your desktop called lesson_4 and open lesson_4 in your code editor. As per usual, create a new file and call it IDs-classes.html. Open that up. And let's put our basic HTML structure. I just copied and pasted. I have a little template set up where I could just copy this and paste it. So if you wanted to do the same, just write it out, save a file called template.html, and just copy it and paste it when you need it. That's what I did there. Okay, give it the title of IDs and Classes. And I am going to show you what an ID is and what a class is. So let's just start by adding a paragraph. And let's say this element has the ID of paragraph 1. Let's put this in little quotation marks here. And then another P element, and say this element has the class of fancy. Okay, so if I were to save this and check it out in my browser, there's going to be nothing special about this at all. It's just going to be two paragraph tags with nothing else. They don't have IDs or classes yet. Okay, so let's add an ID. It's an attribute, and it's going to look like this. And in the quotation marks, we're going to give it the ID of paragraph 1. Let's also add a class, and I'll explain what they are after. This is what a class looks like, and let's give it the class of fancy. So if I were to save this and check it out, nothing's going to change. All it is extra info on these elements. This one has the ID of paragraph 1, and this one has the class of fancy. An ID is a unique identification for the element it is assigned to. So this paragraph has a unique ID of paragraph 1. It's important to remember that IDs can only be used once on your web page. You can't have multiple IDs. You can't have multiple IDs that are the same, for example. So I can't have this because there should only be one element with the ID of paragraph 1. This could have paragraph 2, and this one could have paragraph 3 or 4, or it could have the ID of big paragraph or whatever. So you can only use this unique ID once on this web page. You can't have multiple instances of the ID because it's unique to that element. And the reason why you have an ID is because later in CSS, what we will be touching on is you can select this ID, so the ID of paragraph 1, so that you can do something with it, that you can make it, you can style it, you can make it look different than the other paragraphs or the other elements that don't have the ID of paragraph 1. Classes, however, are kind of like an identification as well, but you can have multiple instances of a class. So I can have multiple paragraphs with the class of fancy, or I can have other elements that have the class of fancy. So this is allowed because in CSS, when we touch on it later, you can select all instances of fancy, the class of fancy, and do something with them. So let's say all paragraph tags that have the class of fancy we want to be purple, whereas all paragraph tags that don't have the class of fancy will just be black. So that's kind of how that works. An ID is a unique identifier for an element, and a class is kind of a global identifier for an HTML element. So that's kind of the basic 101 of IDs and classes. It might be a little bit confusing of a concept right now, but you're going to start seeing me using IDs and classes now in the following lectures and as we go forward, and you're going to see how they work, and it's going to start making sense, especially once we start getting into CSS. So just hang in there and follow along. I promise you this concept will become clear pretty soon. So I'll see you soon, my friends.